Hi everyone. In this video, I want to cover the set of questions you all posted in the discussion board yesterday for research, and then in a short accompanying video, I'm going to talk about the MLA questions that you posted. First off, I want to thank you all. These are really good questions and a lot of good things to talk about. So I'm going to I've grouped them together, and I'm just going to work through your questions over a couple specific themes. But feel free, if you have other questions, to continue to post them in the Unit 2 discussion board. Email me about anything specific, and I'm glad to help out with that. So in terms of the research questions, a couple of things about, I think the first set of questions kind of dealt with credibility of sources. I want to talk about that. So for example, Max's question, so how recent do articles need to be relevant for this paper? And that just kind of depends. It depends a lot on your topic. If it's something that's fairly new, like let's say you're looking at the trend of Pokemon Go, obviously there's only going to be stuff from the past couple of weeks. So it's very new, it's very relevant. If it's been going on for a lot longer, and especially if you want to provide, say, a historical perspective or provide some context, no longer running issue like privacy on Facebook or payment services like PayPal or Venmo, right? Stuff that from the past couple of years is going to be good. More recent stuff is good to establish what the situation is right now. So it really is dependent a whole lot on your topic and what you're looking at as to what types of sources and how recent they're going to be and things like that. And so, relevance is good. And this kind of goes to your overall collection of sources. You want a good blend of different types of sources. So newspapers are going to be good sources, websites, they'll be good sources because they provide, a kind of up-to-date perspective, but they're often kind of short-sighted, right? Because they're just posting about what's happening right now. So a magazine or a longer think piece can help provide a bit of a longer perspective. And then the academic journal articles that you're going to be finding might be about even a longer perspective, right? How has this issue developed over the past couple of years or something like that? So that's kind of something you want to keep in mind. And kind of building on that, Joe's question about if somebody's a young writer and you're not sure, how do you know if it's a reliable source or not? So this is going back to the activity you did a little bit earlier this week, that source evaluation activity, and looking at that chapter on evaluating sources. There's a whole different list of things to look for, right? And you may not recognize an author, right? You probably won't. There's so many people writing online, you won't always recognize who the author is. But what you might recognize is the publication, right? So maybe you don't know Tim Hwang, but you recognize The Atlantic, or maybe you don't know Willa Remus, you recognize Slate, or somebody who writes for Fox News or CNN or whoever. So keep in mind that if you don't know the author, you try to Google them and look a little bit more about them. Look at the publication, look at where their work is being put out. So if it seems like a credible source, it's probably going to be okay. If it seems like their personal website and there's not really much else out there, that's probably a red flag to think about. So and then kind of moving down the list. So Christopher's questions about the research process on citing sources at a very large company. So since he's looking at a very particular topic with the kind of effect of pornography today, right? A site like the Pornhub statistical reports, while a little strange and not usually thought of as a research, tool, would actually work for this assignment, right? They know what they're talking about. If they've done a study, if they've done the research and it's clear what the method is, and it seems to kind of contribute to your argument, that's fine, right? So it doesn't matter if it's Pornhub or any other website, right? And that's what the Pew Internet research site can be helpful for a lot of you, because they're a fact tank, and they really just kind of go out and ask questions and see, like, how many people are doing this, how many people are using this technology. So that kind of stuff can be helpful. So if you can find, and the other question is about source accessibility, right? So a couple of you asked questions about Google Scholar, and I'm going to come back to Google Scholar in a little bit, but let's say you find a source there and you can't find it somewhere else. First off, you should hopefully have access through one of ASU's other databases. If you can find it through another database, and I believe there's kind of an ASU Get It Now button that can tell you what other database might have the resource available. So, and if you can't find something online, you can always use the Ask a Librarian feature through the library website. There's somebody available 24 hours a day, I believe, to answer your questions. So, they can help you out too. But so if you can't find the original source, but you can find another source citing it, and we'll talk about this again a little bit in the MLA video, but basically so if basically somebody has a quote from the source and you really like that quote and you can't get a hold of the original source, you can cite it from the secondary source. So that's something, but you would just kind of cite the secondary source you found it in. So you can use that, but it is important with your sources to make sure you have access to the whole thing, so you actually know the entire argument or what's being said, and you just kind of pick out a little piece of information and do that without knowing the author's intentions. So, okay, so moving on, James Lee's questions. For research, what range of concurrency would help contribute to the credibility of an argument pertaining to digital trends regarding this particular essay? So this is kind of going back to the question I just answered, Max's question. It just depends. Current is good, right? You definitely want a blend of good sources that are current and up to date, because that's going to give you the best perspective on your issue. But really for this paper, I kind of recommend, most of the times for your newspapers, magazines, websites, if it's been published in about a 2-year window or so, it's probably okay. It's probably good, unless something drastic has happened in that past 2 years, and you kind of need to make sure you're accounting for whatever that changes along the way. In terms of the academic journal articles, which I'll come back to in a few minutes, those are going to be a little bit more of a window on those, just kind of based on the type of sources they are. So, let's see, moving on. So Emma's question, can you interview people? I mean, if there's somebody you can interview that it makes sense to and they would be a credible source on this issue, absolutely, right? But you can't just interview your friend or your grandma and kind of ask what they have to say. But, if you happen to know somebody, if you're looking at online educational tools or something like that, somebody who works in that field, you have access, you can definitely interview them for the paper, and it's a great source to have. Now, remember that it's a primary source, so it's going to be just kind of one person's view or opinion, and so you want to make sure that's fleshed out with secondary research as well. So just kind of. So I'll come back to in the MLA video on how to cite interviews, but it's a pretty straightforward process. So, and yes, Academic Search Premier is a good tool to utilize for this paper, as Emma asked. It's probably the best database for this paper because it has access to so much. And nice things about Academic Search Premier is that as you use that database, on the side you can tick a little box that says academic, or I think it says academic journals or academic peer-reviewed journals, and then the sources it will pull up will only be the academic journal articles. So you can kind of look through those and make sure you have a strong academic journal article to have. So, moving on. Let's see. Hiram's question. And apologies, folks, since we've never met face-to-face, if I'm butchering your name, I apologize. Jeffrey with a G. It's happened all my life, so sorry. So Iram asks, so would quotes, tweets, status updates from people's social media be a credible source to use? So again, just like with the interviews, if it's a person who it makes sense to cite for your paper, you can absolutely go to their social media account and cite something. And that the Sage Publishing article from yesterday has how to cite tweets and Facebook posts, I believe, and YouTube videos. So you can absolutely use social media posts. It shouldn't be the only source you look at, but can definitely be a source that you bring into your paper. So okay, I think, yeah, so that's kind of the set of questions on credibility and sources. And so the next set is really kind of, is the big one. I think it's about finding and using sources, and then going back to how do you integrate these sources into your paper and use them as support. So I'm going to go through and look at those questions now. So Christian's question, so is your credibility effective if you use a source that doesn't directly contribute to the argument? So I'm basically thinking that means that the source, if it's kind of about a counter argument or something that doesn't, maybe background or contextual information, yes, absolutely. As long as it makes sense for your paper to bring in that information and cite that source, yeah, go for it. it's not going to undercut your credibility. And it's important, actually, if you go back to the organizational guide, you'll note it's important to have some background information so you establish the issue for your reader before you jump into your argument. So now the thing is, you also want to have sources that are going to support your argument, the causal chain that you're going to be arguing about, the solution you're going to be proposing, or the course of action you'll be proposing towards the end of the paper. So, so you want a good blend of different types of sources. So. And again, I'm going to hold off on that academic journal article question on Christian's post just till the next set of questions. So Christina's question, could choosing different topics for her papers influence the level of credibility required for sources to adequately support our ideas? Yes, actually it could. And this kind of goes back to the question about relevance. And so it just, a lot of the research depends on your topic. If it's a longer running issue, you're probably going to find more credible sources out there, or I'd say kind of more established sources out there because people have been writing about it for a while, would have hit major news outlets, things like that. But it doesn't mean that, newer sources or newer issues aren't going to be talked about by those same outlets. So it is a good question. And really, you want to be able to make a strong case in your paper for your argument. So you want the evidence to back it up. And if you can find that, great. If not, if you're having trouble, there's a couple ways to kind of approach that. And I think somebody asked about that I'll get to in just a minute. But, so it's a great question. And really, it's kind of one I'll kind of say it depends just on your topic and the research out there and how long it's been around and things like that. So, okay, moving down to Danielle's question. So again, yes, you can look at social media responses on the topic. Now, again, just like with the rhetorical analysis, you can look at what people are saying. I would say public figures, people who publish out there for large audiences to read. You can look at their social media responses. Generally, you want to avoid kind of picking out some random persons we're supposed to, I don't know, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton's post, things like that. So. You can definitely bring them in. They can be used as a they can bring an opinion, or it can help. That could be sort of kind of primary research where you get more into the specifics about how individual people feel about the issue rather than worrying about kind of the specific statistics and things like that. So, okay. So yeah, I was right. So Kayla's question. So there needs to be 7 resources. So if you can't find 7 sources, or you're finding that a lot of your sources are repetitive, before you freak out and jump ship, what you might do is think about your search terms, right? Because sometimes, and depending on your topic, your search terms are going to change. And especially when you're looking at the academic, like Academic Search Premier, the other research databases, they use a very different type of search process than, say, Google does. So where Google, you can type in a question and pull up sources that it thinks will be the answer. You can't type in a question in Academic Search Premier, so you need to think of key terms. So if you're looking at, so if I want to use the example of Pokemon Go. Let's say we'll use that since it's been kind of insanely popular over the past 2 weeks in the news. So if you look at Pokemon Go, maybe you'll find a couple articles, right? But you probably won't find a ton. You definitely won't find any academic journal articles at this point. So what do? Broaden your search term, right? So what are search terms you could use that would still be about the issue you're looking at without necessarily being about Pokemon Go in particular? So, video games might be too broad. Okay, but what, maybe mobile gaming, social gaming, alternative reality gaming, these are different terms that might be helpful. And sometimes it's just about a kind of trial and error process. One of the nice things about Academic Search Premier is, let's say you find a good article, a good source, it only pulls up 2 or 3. You can look at the listing at the bottom, and it will show you different search terms that people have kind of tagged that article with. So it's good to use those sources. Now, this goes, well, again, I'm going to hold off on that question just for a few more minutes about the academic peer-reviewed journal article and talk about that specifically in a few minutes. But the big thing is, work with your search terms. Try to figure out different terms that work. And again, this is where librarians can be really helpful. So feel free and take full advantage of that Ask a Librarian option through the library, because you can they know what they're doing, right? Every semester I go into the library and have the librarians help out, and they think of key terms and ways to kind of approach searches in ways that I haven't been able to think about. So they're great resources, so take full advantage of them. But also feel free to email me too if you're having trouble finding sources or you can't find anything, or just kind of finding the same thing. Like, let me know, and I'm glad to help out however I can. So, so James Ryan asked, would it affect your credibility to use articles against your viewpoint? So basically to address counter arguments. I mean, yes, it would in a good way, right? Because part of what you have to do is think about what the other side is arguing about your topic and how you can address that issue. So yeah, absolutely, right? You don't want to spend too much time in your paper devoted to the counter argument, because the more you address the other side, the more it can take over your argument. But yeah, no, absolutely, you can look at counter arguments, and it's a good thing to do, right? Especially if you're arguing for one specific aspect of a trend and there's a whole group of people saying, well, no, we disagree. You want to say, here's why I'm seeing it this way, or arguing for it this way, and why I disagree with those people. So that's really important, something you need to do. So who's this? Okay, Dree's question. So it's talking about police brutality, and most of the places, ways we see firsthand through videos. So they're having a lot of videos posted to social media accounts. So you can, I would say consider it kind of a primary source, right, as examples of police brutality. But it's a good broader question. Do all sources have to be strictly academic? No. That's what I mean by a good blend of sources. That's why you need one academic journal article. But you want a good blend of sources overall. You don't want to just have one journal article and then 6 newspapers, because it's only going to give you 2 types of perspective. So, but really, lots of different people are talking about your topics, so use that research. Feel free to go do some searching online and finding, websites or magazines, different types of sources that are addressing your issue, right? YouTube videos, as long as they're from credible accounts, it would be good to cite. Feel free to kind of go and really kind of look at a lot of different perspectives on your issue. So, Jacob asked, if my causal proposal argument covers more than one main topic, should my research cover at least one peer-reviewed article for each topic? That's a good question. You don't have to. It might be good to have a couple of different, if there's 2 kind of key concepts, it might be good to have a peer-reviewed academic journal article for each one. But that's really up to you and the research and what you find out there. So I'm not requiring it, is the question, basically. So. And then kind of the last question on this thread about finding and using sources. So Talisha asked, how well do you recommend sources brought up within Google Scholar? What's the difference from the regular Google website? So Google Scholar is a database. It's the one people go to. It's not honestly the best one, because it pulls up some super weird search results sometimes. What it does is it goes through and it looks through academic databases. So that's the big difference from just regular Google. And we have it through ASU, so you can use it if you can log in with your ASU account and go through Google Scholar, and then use that to kind of, hopefully, if you want to find the article, it can direct you to the database you can find it in through ASU's libraries. But it isn't the best, because sometimes you'll be searching a term and it will pull up something that's totally not related whatsoever to what you're talking about, right? So it's hit or miss. And the reason I like Academic Search Premier more is because you can tell pretty quickly about what sources are going to be available and how you can find them in the library. So, okay, now to the last set of questions, which are about, as you were all asking about, the peer-reviewed journal articles. So let me kind of go through and see what questions we're about. So first off, in terms of finding the academic journal article, again, thinking about your search term is going to be helpful. If you're looking for Pokemon Go, you're not going to find one, right? If it's a very recent topic, because it takes, a year minimum for a very quick academic journal article, for an article to be written and get to the fully published stage, you're not going to find a whole lot. And to kind of have some examples here, I've got a couple of pieces out now, or my second piece just came out. And I finished writing that one about 2 or 3 years ago. I've got one that I co-wrote with somebody else 5 years ago that is still not published. So, and I have no idea actually when it's going to be published, right? So academic journal articles are great resources because they provide detailed, in-depth perspectives from experts who've done the scholarly research. They're, the top people in their field. But if you're looking at more recent topics, you won't always be able to find a academic journal article about your specific topic. And that's really where you need to go broader with your research topic. So again, if you're looking at Pokemon Go, thinking about like social gaming, or if you're looking at Uber, maybe ride sharing, or even things like the gifting economy or the sharing economy. Maybe if you're looking at a newer site like Yik Yak, right? Anonymity posting online, right? Looking at anonymous posting, which even if Yik Yak or Yeti and sites like that or services like that are new, these trends have been around for a longer time. So, and once again, I can't, I feel like I am repeating myself, but the Ask a Librarian is really helpful. So if you're having trouble finding a scholarly journal, contact me, contact a librarian. We can really try to help you out and figure out a way to kind of use the right search terms to find an article. So if you're having a lot of trouble, I would say kind of broaden your search, think about different search terms first, because, a lot of your more specific topics won't be easily found within academic journals. So and that kind of answers John Mendoza's, what are your digital trend doesn't have anything that's exactly out there. So as long as there's something about the journal article that relates to what you're looking at, that's going to be helpful. So let's see. And Alexandria. So, okay. Yeah. And a couple of you asked, so what is an academic peer-reviewed journal article? So there are basically these are the journals written by, that publish the work written by scholars and experts in their fields. So, there's journals for Shakespeare scholars, biomedical research, electrical engineers, and there's different levels of journals. But what most academic journal articles go through is this process of peer review. So, which is kind of similar to what you've been doing for the first paper and you'll be doing for the second paper in terms of peer reviewing resources, but it can be a lot more brutal, because a lot of times you will have your work as a scholar read by two other anonymous scholars who won't have their names on it. And while sometimes they can be really helpful, sometimes writing sucks and it's horrible. So so it's it's a mixed bag. But what's happened then is those journals are able to say, hey, we've had this piece vetted by an editor and by a couple other experts in the field, so we know it's good. We know it's quality, right? People have kind of said, yes, this is something that represents, some good research in the field of, early American literature or accounting and financing or something like that. So now those, if you're not sure, if you find a journal, you're not sure, I often recommend Googling the title, because you'll usually be able to find a website. And a lot of times, most of the times, you'll find journals are either related to academic societies and organizations or to universities. So if you find one and you're not sure, and it doesn't seem to kind of tell you who sponsors it, that might be a red flag. So you'll also find there are more open access journals out there now, which can be good, but you want to make sure they are peer reviewed. Usually in the About tab, you'll be able to see, is this a peer reviewed journal article or not? Again, this is why Academic Search Premier is such a helpful tool, because as I said a little bit earlier, you can, as you're doing that search, you can check that box on the side and it will just pull up the peer reviewed journal articles for you. And then you can look through those and find one that works. So I think that's kind of me hitting all the research questions. I'm going to work on that, answering your MLA questions in just a bit in a follow-up video. But feel free, as I said, to post any kind of follow-up questions you have in the Unit 2 discussion board, to email them to me. And again, don't hesitate to use the Ask a Librarian resource, because it's a great tool and they can help a whole lot with that research moving forward. So otherwise, keep on working, and I look forward to seeing what you all come up with for this second paper.